What up, everybody? This is Mr. View, and I'm back at it. Woo! Yeah, another lecture yesterday and the day before, a little PowerPoint action, but I'm ready to get back in front. So today we're going to be yapping about the revolution in Russia, right? We talked a little bit about that in World War I, but today we're going to go a little bit more in depth, and then tomorrow we're going to talk about who actually took over. Today's more about the reasoning. Yesterday and the day before, we learned about imperialism. Imperialism is when you take over another country, right? You control that other country, and you do it for economic reasons, military reasons, or kind of like philanthropy or giving, helping out the needy, so for charity. But we got to remember the first reason: money, economic, right? So imperialism, and we talked about how Africa, especially, had been divided up by the European powers, and the European countries were upset after World War One because they did not gain their freedom like they thought they might. So that leads into some revolutions and some bad things. Talked about Leopold from Belgium, where he had done some terrible things in the Congo, and they'd hacked off all those limbs. Remember seeing those pictures of the guys with nubs at the end of their arms because of the brutality of the Belgian people when the Africans didn't meet quotas. So anyway, today we're yapping about Russia. Whoop whoop. And they had a revolution, like we talked about. They got out of the war of World War One toward the end in 1917 because they were so bad at it and things were going really, really wrong in Russia. They had a dynasty at this time, and a dynasty, if you remember earlier in the semester, is a ruling family. Terry, what's that again? Yeah, a ruling family. That's when somebody rules, right? And then when they die, it goes to their son or daughter. And then when they die, it goes to their son or daughter, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it just follows the line. And in Russia, the Romanovs have had power for 300 years. What's that again? That's right, 300 years. And so the ruling family, the dynasty, was the Romanovs. And Nicholas II, he was the Tsar or king of Russia at that time. He was not doing a great job. He was corrupt and he was bad at war, and they were all backward and stuff. And so people didn't like him a lot. Russia, though, was huge, still is, still huge, right? It goes from the Pacific Ocean all the way over there to Eastern Europe, which is way over here. It's massive, it's huge, it's got a lot of great resources, it's got a lot of cold stuff, but it's got a lot of people too. And so they have this huge empire. They should be strong and they should be wealthy, but they're not at this time. They're very weak, and they don't have a whole lot of rich people. Most people were actually poor peasants, farmers, right? And they didn't have a lot to their name. They didn't have a lot of possessions. They didn't have a lot of money. They were still practicing feudalism, which is that lords giving to the vassals and vassals giving to lesser vassals. And then you're kind of tied to the land, if you will. So it was really backward in Russia. And then here comes World War One. That's right, World War One comes on, and they're just bad at war. Nicholas had some secret police, and he would have these secret police find people who were going against him, talking against him, have them thrown in jail or even killed or exiled, sent to a bad place. In World War One, the Russians, right? They were not very good at war. The factories were horrible, right? We talked about how Russia was backward. Well, their factories were backward. They didn't have that industrial revolution really hit them very hard or very well, and so they've struggled to keep up with supplies and weapons for World War One. And so their soldiers didn't have enough supplies or weapons. Their transportation also broke down. They didn't have a great transportation system of roads and trains and things like that, so they couldn't get their supplies to the soldiers. So these supplies were very important because there's not enough weapons. That leads to dead guys, right? If you don't have enough guns or ammunition or food or whatever, that is going to suck for your people, for your soldiers especially. And in 1915, 1 year, there were 2 million Russian casualties in World War One. Let's put that in perspective. The United States hasn't had 2 million casualties in World War One, World War Two, or Vietnam combined. So in 1 year, Russians had more casualties than the Americans had in World War One, World War Two, and Vietnam combined. That's a lot of people dying or being put out of work, injured, whatever. There were food and fuel shortages at home outside of the war. And so even the common people were being affected. Not only were they sending their sons to the front to get killed with no weapons, but now at home there's not enough food and there's not enough fuel. Workers struck. They weren't being paid accordingly. And so they decided, hey, we're going to strike. So all of this perfect storm, all these bad things happening all at once causes the Russian people to revolt. They want Nicholas out of Dodge, right? They want to get rid of their czar or king and end this dynasty or ruling family. So what they do is they go after Nicholas. And Nicholas II, he's smart about it. He sees the writing on the wall. He's in deep trouble. So he abdicates. That means he steps down from power. He gives up his crown. He says, okay, I won't be king anymore. And so he and his family kind of move to this estate, although they're kind of kept there. They're kept in this estate. They can't leave, kind of like Louis the 16th, right, in France. So he's stuck there. A temporary government took over, and they start to change some things in Russia. Nicholas sees the writing on the wall. He knows they got to get out of Dodge, but they can't. So they're stuck there, and eventually they are executed. The whole family, Nicholas, wife, and kids, are all lined up, bam, and killed. And that ends that ruling family in Russia. There is no going back now. Right? So Nicholas II, he's out, his family out, and in steps a new government tomorrow, right? So to recap, there was a revolution in Russia. The ruling family, the dynasty at the time was Nicholas II and the Romanovs. They had ruled for 300 years. But the Russian Empire, although it was huge, was very backward and poor. In World War I, they were really bad. They didn't have good factories. They had terrible transportation, and they didn't have enough weapons for their soldiers. They had food and fuel shortages at home, and the workers decided to strike. They had a lot of people die in World War I. When Nicholas steps down or abdicates the throne, a temporary government took over, and they thought, hey, we better get rid of this Nicholas guy and his family, and bam, they go away. That's it for today. I hope you learned a little bit of something from the Russian Revolution. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.